Welcome everyone. Today we have another new episode, and this episode is very important and special for World Talent Economy Forums. I want to give a special thanks to all of our audience, especially the young community, youth community from Asia Pacific, those who always support World Talent Economy Forums, different universities, school, college, as well as corporation, those who supporting us and continuously they utilizing our content for their youth developments. Beside that, I want to give thanks to all of our 300 speakers from 100 different countries, and I want to give the special thanks to today's sessions. All of them are very famous speaker. We have Mr. Rob, we have Mr. Alex, we have Professor Donalds, we have Dr. Williams, we have Mr. James Eid. All of them are very famous speaker and
Oh.
so I want to start with Mr. Rob, because from last week we are getting huge questions and support from different universities, school, college. They love to learn more about Silicon Valley. They love to learn more about different top corporation, what you are talking about, IBM, Microsoft, you many more good example you are sharing with our youth community. So what
Sure.
new things you want to share about startup and innovations, and actually our youth community want to develop themselves in the innovative industry?
Well, most of the large companies that you mentioned have investment arms that are out looking for opportunities. Not so much for initial startups. They want a proof of concept. In other words, that the ideas are viable and they connect back into something that the firms are doing. One way to learn about the things the firms are doing is to take on an internship. Right now, internships are having trouble getting filled because a lot of the intern part is to learn how to do the business, and with everybody remote, that's been kind of a problem. It's not that programs are dead; it's just that it's become a little bit more difficult to figure out what the interns are going to do. But finding out which companies still have internship programs going on, getting involved in them early on, getting experience, and most important, getting contacts with the firms can provide access to some of these funding arms that can certainly help develop a startup along, more linear lines. Typically, unlike most VCs, who do provide some help, but the companies will provide executive help, executive oversight, and direction in terms of how to develop product that best fit within that eventual corporate envelope. So you get money up front, and there's a chance at the back end you might be acquired, or might just be a favored partner in some future endeavor. But it's one way to work with the larger companies and get engaged in a startup. But as I say, first you have to be doing something they're interested in, and the best way to do that is either become an intern yourself or get to know an intern and work with them as part of your effort.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Alex, you are doing fantastic work with this climate change initiative, and most important view is that, like I'm observing from Asia Pacific, country like Indonesia, country like Bangladesh, country like Maldives, India, they have lot of challenges in climate change area. They have to face lot of challenges, and beside that, this kind of countries very much they have very good ecosystem for social entrepreneurships. So what your advice for this climate change and these issues, how the youth community develop different kind of small solutions and they can solve their ecosystem problem? What your advice and what your idea you have?
Hello, good morning, Sharif, and everyone else on the panel. So yeah, I'm broadcasting from here in Santa Cruz, California. So I'm near the coast. I am approximately 30 miles from Silicon Valley. It's right over the hill. It's an amazing place. Of course, there's nice neighborhoods, there's bad neighborhoods. As we just mentioned, there is IBM and Microsoft. And as I've mentioned before, there is, like when I'm driving over in San Jose, taking care of bills or errands or any other reason I have to be there, while I'm driving around, it's really cool because all the companies that we're used to seeing, that we've seen throughout our life, we've seen grow, or we see continue to just get bigger, and their logos everywhere, however you want to view them. So while I'm driving, I always see or drive past some of the buildings. Like Netflix is right over there, like the big building, and you see it just says Netflix. Facebook is relatively close. You see SanDisk. Apple has a big location. eBay. It's just interesting that there's all those huge businesses there right here, corporations and companies, but there's also a lot of startups. I was really excited when I started seeing some of these startups creating all the little tiny electric scooters that they would, it was like some sort of pilot project, and then they were distributing them all over the city. They had this little website and like a barcode, so you'd get the app on your phone, you would add your card, and then you would unlock this scooter. So it was startups like that that would grow in Silicon Valley, and they would spread to different places around the world. Or some of these big tech companies might see some of the smaller companies. So I think it was a really good ecosystem just to have all of them in one location. So if a small business or a small company was kind of advertising their product or their company, or what they're working towards in that area, some of the big people, some of the big names, some of the larger like CEOs would see it because it's kind of all in one area. Again, that's Silicon Valley. I think they just have a really good ecosystem just because it's all pretty much located in one area. Even though it's a big city, it is just kind of consolidated. If you can think of like LA, that's where a lot of movies are produced and productions. And that happened because they had a really good ecosystem. That's where a lot of like movie producers would move to, a lot of stars, a lot of actors, a lot of people that were into performing. And that was their whole ecosystem. So if you go to like Donald's mentioned, if you go to a party and you run into someone, you talk to them, you start conversations, and Donald's always talking about networking and, you know, going to different events. And so they, down in LA, they have a certain ecosystem of how, or a system, how they network and grow. And Silicon Valley has one of its own. And I think other countries would have certain sections or certain areas that would allow that. Like in Santa Cruz and other places that I've been to, not only is there like commercial areas and residential areas, but some cities, they have a whole area where it's like a lot of artists took over the whole block or the whole neighborhood or the whole region. So I think just starting to like network and create that would be important. And I'm going to go ahead and continue to write some notes. With startups, I did just want to mention that, you know, you start, you know, with the startup a business, first you have the idea and, you know, you write down all your ideas and your notes, you have a plan, and then eventually you start taking action. Another thing that's important with this conversation is just that there's different types of business models and platforms. And we might go into that more. So just to name a few, there's just like the regular business, there's the nonprofit, there's the LLC. So just knowing what platform you're going to go with is also important before you get started.
Thank you.
Like
Thank you. Professor Donalds, you have a very keen interest to develop human resources, and you have a lot of experience from Silicon Valley, as well as you are a big fan of Europe. So what is the things you want to share with our youth communities, especially they can learn both from Silicon Valley as well from your European ecosystem?
I want to mention that I was a software engineer for 20 years, and I've worked at places like, I've worked at Hewlett Packard, I worked at Bell Labs, I worked at all those different places. So I have a pretty good insight from inside. So what's complicated to me to be able to give good advice is I don't really understand what the ecosystem is like in these various countries. But I'll definitely echo what Alex just said, which is that Silicon Valley is concentrated, and it's not just the tech companies there. It's kind of a chicken and egg thing because we have the infrastructure to be able to grow the tech companies, fund startups and so on like that. I mean, venture capital sort of existed, but it wasn't until Kleiner Perkins that it became such an industry. And there's hundreds of there's billions of dollars, and I'm not sure how many billions of dollars, but certainly over $100 billion in funds in Silicon Valley. Like I was just talking to somebody the other day who's agreed to come on this show, and he was talking about how their organization was raising $150 million and what particular type of startup that they were focused on. I don't know that there's internships necessarily in Bangladesh. There might very, very well be. I mean, I don't really know, and if there are, and when there are, that's very good advice. One of the things you have to figure out when you're starting a company, and something that I certainly was not good at the beginning, is your market. Like, who is it? How many people is it possible that you're going to be able to sell whatever you're selling to? If you have a solution, is it a solution for a lot of people? You also have to figure out who your competition is. I've had companies that have given pitches that I've listened to who've said, we're going to take away this much business from Microsoft, and that's how we're going to succeed. And you just look at them and you go, no, you're not. Microsoft has so much more money than you do that if they want to copy your business, they'll just, hire 100 people and copy your business, and there's not a thing you can do about it. And so I don't know how many companies have become large from Bangladesh, but I know that people from India come to Silicon Valley because we have the law firms. If you go down Page Mill Road, it's just gigantic law firm after gigantic law firm. I mean, these are 20-story buildings just filled with lawyers who know how to make corporations and the intellectual property. So besides the venture capital industry, there's also the legal structure so that they can create these. And what I think that people make a mistake a little bit is that they say Silicon Valley is about technology. Silicon Valley is to some degree, but what Silicon Valley is expert at is creating companies. And it actually doesn't matter too much what kind of a company that they start. However, we have UC Berkeley, UC Santa Cruz, UC Stanford, all together. You can practically throw a rock from one and hit the other. They're so close. And one of the things that's been most desirable at these places is computer engineering of various sorts. And so when you start a company and you want to grow, you're going to have to be able to hire people to work at that company. And we have also a pool of human capital here that's quite a bit, it's unique. It's difficult to replicate because UC Berkeley is probably the best public university in the United States. Stanford is, of course, Stanford. And UC Santa Cruz isn't as well known, but they've got an incredible computer science department. They're #1 in space science. They're like if you go to Hawaii and climb to the top of Mauna Kea, there's a telescopes and it says UC Santa Cruz on them. So they manage telescopes all over the world. And what Alex said about being what it is that you want to do is, if you wanted to start a fashion company, don't start a fashion company in Silicon Valley. You go to New York. Media companies actually do start quite a bit in Silicon Valley. I mean, that's where Industrial Light and Magic came from, one of the most amazing. And they're very computer savvy because there's so much graphics and things like that nowadays that there's quite a lot of the film industry has branches in Silicon Valley. But if you want to do industrial manufacturing and things like that, you need to go to Chicago area. I mean, there's many areas in the United States that have different kinds of expertise. So even though we can do things remotely now, it's not the same, because like I got laid off at a job and I had another job already from somebody I met in a pub who was a CEO of a company that liked me. And so that kind of serendipity you're not going to get working remotely. You can be a worker bee, but you're not going to be able to start a company unless you go where the company that you want to grow, make, exists, thrives, because that's where the people will understand what you're doing so that they can support you financially. That's where you can get the resources, human resources you need to grow. So you've really got to pack up and leave. You got to go where the particular type of company that you're trying to start happens. I mean, otherwise, that's why there's so many companies in Silicon Valley. They come here because the ecosystem exists.
Okay, actually, every country has their own ecosystem. Let's say China is a very good manufacturing hub. Malaysia also manufacturing and tourism hub. Example, Singapore is a knowledge-based economy. Example, country like Bangladesh, it's a textile industry. Like Pakistan's India is another's like hub for software engineers and different kind of things. And most important thing is that in Asia Pacific, 60% populations in Asia Pacifics, and their economy actually growing very fast. So World Talent Economy Forums, we do more focus right now in Asia Pacific, even though we have access 100 different countries. We already shared that 1 million students from India already they join in a World Talent Economy Forum. They will share our content for their developments, as well as different countries from China, from India, from Bangladesh, Pakistan, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, many countries, youth communities actually joining. And this is our objective. We want to solve their problem. We want to help them to grow their ecosystems. And most important thing is that the speakers, those who contributing their knowledge, their experience, their point of views, actually this is very helpful for our youth communities. They can understand what's going on in USA, what's going on in knowledge-based society, how we can improve, how we can integrate it with Industry 4.0. So this is our objective, how we can develop better ecosystem. And with the help of God, we are getting very good support from our local ecosystem. So I want to ask Dr. Williams that you are a very good policymakers, and you are a very good analyst on that particular points. Even though we are observing many governments from Asia Pacific, they are investing a lot of money right now for startup and startup ecosystems. So what type of policy we can implement? What type of policy you have in USA? How do you want to share your experience with us?
Okay, well, hey, great. Welcome. Good to see everybody again. Happy New Year for those that I've missed since the last year. I can't believe we've known each other since last year, but it's kind of funny. Let me begin by just simply saying this. I want to begin just with a brief comment, and then I'll move over to the matters of the governmental policies and such. And that is, I want to pick up on an idea and a concept that all of the speakers so far have been speaking of, and that's this the concept of networking, internships, and connecting with those around you in your field. Innovation, and I'm not so much sure about the mechanics necessarily of startups, although people figure that out every day. People have been creating companies for hundreds of years. It's rather the point with regard to information. And I guess what I would suggest to the young people out there and the students out there, it's that it's rather a focus in on the interconnectivity, because what you ought to understand is that even if you are interested in building a product or advancing an idea, you're trading in information. And in today's information age, regardless of where you're located around the world or the globe, you really want to be at the inflection point of the transference of that information. So in that respect, you might want to become or see yourself as an informational middleman, because you want to understand what's already out there in terms of your area of interest and desire and passion, and then see where the future goes, and then see how it is that you can value add. And that becomes really more of an informational middleman before you can then take center stage as the innovator. So with that, I just wanted to kind of point that out, because at its core, the concept is the same. Whether you're networking, you're just trading on information, you're meeting people that can help you with information. Whether you're doing an internship, whether you're learning about different types of business structures and such in school or outside of school or whatever it is. It's really the concept of an informational middleman between taking what has gone on, seeing what's missing, adding value to that, or approaching it in a new way, and then moving forward and hopefully helping, as I believe Donald said, helping the most number of people out, which would ultimately make the product successful. Now, with regard to a governmental policy, I want to begin with just this one thing, and I just want to talk, at least have everybody understand the concept of net neutrality. And that's an issue that we've been fighting here in the United States for quite some time. And essentially, it just boils down to making sure that the internet and the transference of information is fair amongst all players when it comes to the usage of the internet, access for businesses and or whatever entity it is. And so I would just focus in on net neutrality laws and make sure that I enshrine those policies and goals in any and all governmental policies. The next thing with regard to governmental policy, I would begin to think about the next evolution with regard to the access to the internet. And that is, I would begin to formulate the policy such that we begin to treat it like a public utility. And not rather as an access of the wealthy, but rather as a utility, no different than electricity, no different than water, no different than gas and oil. Because as we move forward, that's where the real gap is. And quite frankly, if you're creating the policies for any developing country, including the 60% in the Asian Pacific area that are in fact part of the fastest growing economy, what you want to do is you don't want to have the digital divide, which is what we call it here in the United States. And essentially that's the gap between the haves and have-nots in the electronic information age. And the best way a government can ensure that through various policies is to ensure that you are looking at access to the internet as a public utility. Now that is going to take some time, but it's not unheard of in a society to move from an industry that has been primarily private in nature to make it more public in nature. Here in the United States, we can look to the example of the American railroads. The American railroads, when they first began, were essentially a private network of individually owned railroads across the United States until such time as first they came in and capitalistic pressures consolidated the industry, and then later the United States government came in and nationalized the industry and made it essentially a publicly regulated industry for the benefit of the people. And the internet ought to be seen in the same way. And so right now, while currently it might be in the purview or in the hands of the private sector, there's going to come a point in time when it's going to be, when we must begin to treat it as ubiquitous as a public utility, electricity, water, gas, oil, and heat. And with that in mind, you could then go through net neutrality, public utility concept of the internet as the cornerstones. And then from there, you can have all of the branches that you want to encourage, so that if in some of these countries, if your economy or your ecosystem is manufacturing-based, you can develop ways in the offshoots to employ the information age to assist those industries. But there are numerous examples of local application of it, but at its core, net neutrality and the internet is a public utility. So, Sharif?
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Jamsid, you have your own foundations and you are helping a lot of youth community in Africa for chess and this kind of intellectual developments. Besides that, I know that your wife also a angel investors. You are supporting different kind of startup and other things. How do you want to share your experience as you have very good, strong engagement with developing nations? What's the experience you want to share with our audience, and how we can work together?
Thank you, Sharif, and congratulations on your 200th show. That's very impressive, and I really give you a tip of the hat. But the question I always answer this: you start with yourself first, and then your community, and then you go beyond that. And by starting with yourself, I mean train yourself. I was able to start my own foundation at a later stage in my life because when I was younger, I became an elite software geek. And so when you're a software geek, you have a skill that people want. People are desperate. And then you play one company off of another. If one's going to offer you this much money, Yeah, you spend a couple of years with them, and then somebody else will offer you more, and then somebody else will offer you more, and that's how I assembled a certain amount of financial sustainability and financial capability to start my own venture. I was not funded by anyone else, and I did not rely on government or anybody else besides myself. But then I found out that you can only do so much by yourself. You have to assemble a team, and you have to make contacts, and you have to network, as Professor Donald and others have been suggesting. Now, if you're a software geek, and as I'm also a titled chess player, so I can go anywhere in the world, and they will know that I am a chess master. That's the title that I've earned. Now, the thing that software geeks and chess masters have in common is they're introverts. And if you're introverted, networking does not come naturally to you. But you can train yourself. Start with yourself. Train yourself. I had a fear of public speaking. So what did I do? I spoke in public over and over and over until I was no longer afraid of public speaking. And this networking, even when I was a software engineer, there was one guy in the San Francisco Bay Area that was better than me, clearly better than I was. So I went to lunch with him about 3 times a week until I had basically become his friend. He was in my wedding party, and I got to know the people that he got to know. So even if you're very narrow in your skill set, there are people that you need to have contact with, to pick their brains, to have conversations with, to gain more knowledge than you already have. You'll never get enough knowledge working by yourself. You must be networking. You must be in contact with other people. Now, the other difficulty that I have found, when we talk about startups, and if you look at the way things are now, you're behind the times, because we're talking about Silicon Valley. And well, a lot of people from Silicon Valley are moving to Austin, Texas now. So you have to be looking ahead, not just at the present, but at the future. So you follow where the future is. You have to follow and anticipate where the future is going to be. So maybe you should move to Silicon Valley. I live in the heart of it. It's a great place to live. Couldn't recommend it more highly. But maybe Austin, Texas is the place that you're going to make your imprint. Or maybe it's someplace else. The world is always changing. That's the one thing you can count on, change. And you must adapt, but be aware that it's never going to stay the same. So you have to be flexible. You have to be constantly on lookout for what's changing. And if you can anticipate things with a high rate of success, you will be successful. The other thing is, I live in walking distance to Sandhill. Professor Donald mentioned Page Mill Road. Well, Sandhill Road is the home of venture capitalists. I can't walk my dog without running into a venture capitalist. And venture capitalists learned a great lesson in the late 90s with the dot-com bubble burst. People were investing in companies that just had .com after their name, whether or not they had any revenue. Well, it's changed now. You have to demonstrate revenue. You have to demonstrate that you can be successful before you will get into venture capital money. And not everybody has a rich aunt or uncle that's going to give them money. So these are the things that you must network. You must find out, does your idea, however brilliant it is, have a chance of interesting people that do have the financial resources to make you successful? Because one thing about startups is your burn rate is going to be greater than you anticipate. You are going to anticipate certain expenses. There will be more. There will be more expenses than you think. There will be more expenses, whether it's legal. As you go to Page Mill. Well, Page Mill lawyers are not going to work for free. You're going to have to pay them. And if you have an idea that you want to trademark, trademarking costs money. So there's going to be a lot of expenses about this. But talk to people who have done it, who've been successful. Stick with the winners, and you can do it. If I could do it, you could do it. Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you. Mr. Rob, I have specific questions, and specifically, I love to learn from you. Like I'm just sharing Asia Pacific or Asian education systems with you.
Okay.
from the childhood, every guardians and everybody is very busy that their children has to be fast, they have to be get very good grades, and they have to be very good talented, they have to get very good jobs. So everybody actually running, and all of the talented, they do not know actually what they have to do. Maybe someone has to be cricketer, but they have to be, example, their father want to be engineers. Someone has to be uh, like entrepreneurs, but they have to be doctors because of their guardians. And our education system, I believe that, even I have experience to working with at least 300 different universities and other places. I observed that still we have to improve a lot, specifically what you are discussing about the Silicon Valley, about this innovation system, about this innovative world. Still there are millions and millions of students and the youth community with these academic systems. They do not know actually what they have to do. Those who teach them, they do not know what they are producing. So in that particular situations, what does innovation, real innovation, mean? How we can make our education system more innovative for our youth communities?
Well, remember what I said last time we talked about this. Innovation is not the first thing that you do. The first thing you do is you look out for best practices and look at emulating the best practices. If somebody's already solved a problem very well, you don't need to innovate around that. Folks use innovation as a primary way of solving problems will not be successful. Now, if I'm advising folks that are in school, let's say, right, because I'm involved with another effort that's going in on looking at schools, and it's really, even here in the States, it's pretty bad. The kids are not being taught the fundamentals. You mentioned, parents are pushing them into becoming doctors or pushing them to. That's a mistake. Find out what the kid's good at, find out what they have passion for, and that's the direction that they should take. And that may change. The flexibility should be taught, because what you like in your teens, you may not like in your 20s. And so initially getting a broad set of skills is certainly better than specializing early on, because you don't know where you're going to end up. And here's the problem we're having right now, and that's work-life balance. Across the board, the companies I work with are reporting significant productivity increases, but it's coming at the cost of work-life balance. Folks are working 6-7 day weeks, 10, 12-hour days. Yeah, productivity's up. It's not sustainable. You can't work people like this for long periods of time and not see problems. Certainly we've seen them in China, where we had people committing suicide and jumping out of buildings with that kind of workload. And that's not the way. I mean, you don't want that for your kids. You want kids to be happy. I used to have I still have a friend, but I used to hang out with his father when I was younger, and some of the best lessons I had were from him. And he's made and lost a number of fortunes, but he always was looking for ways to kind of get to know people, get to know how things work, kind of understand where he fit in the world. And at the end of the day, even though he'd lost another fortune, he was one of the happiest guys I'd ever met. But that was because he kind of had control over his life. He knew how things worked. He wasn't always the victim of somebody else making a decision on his behalf. It's kind of early on, you kind of have to figure out what it is you want out of life. And I'll tell you categorically, it's not money. I had a chance to get to know one of the big VCs in Silicon Valley for a while, one of the guys that ran them. And at the end of his life, he was the most unhappy guy I think I've ever known. His complaint was he had all this wealth. He had a fabulous sailing yacht. But he said, my friends get to use the yacht. I don't, and I don't enjoy it. And now that I'm retired, nobody takes me seriously. They've given me an office with a view, and I talk to folks, and they don't care. My grandfather was a CEO, one of the richest, most powerful guys in California, petrochemical companies. Same problem. After he retired, he had no idea what to do with himself, and he degraded and got angry. And that's not the way to do it. And then you find folks, hey, they just have that 9-to-5 job, blue collar, families close, kids are around. They may not have the big castle or McMansion, but they have a great life. And I think we don't spend enough time teaching kids that it's more important to have a great balanced life than it is to have the cars and money. If you have great balanced life and you have cars and money, that's fine. I mean, it's nothing wrong with that. But material wealth is not a good goal. In the 1990s, we had we call it the internet bubble, and we were given BMWs to young engineers, and companies were throwing money at people like nobody's business. And then the bubble burst. And then you had folks living out of those BMWs because they couldn't afford their houses. And I got to tell you, there is really nothing worse than having a lot of wealth and then not having it. It's much better to gradually grow than to get wealth and lose it, because once you've lost it, that becomes debilitating in and of itself. Now your status looks crippled, and you're worried about people are going to see you or are going to be with you. It's really not a way for life. And what you ought to be doing now in education is you should be exploring. What is it you love? What is it you want to do? And look at the depth of the jobs and efforts. You look at entertainers, for instance, and I was an actor for a number of years. I bounced around a lot when I was young, trying to figure out what it is I like to do. And I spent some time in acting. And what you find out really quick is an awful lot of the actors that didn't get that work-life balance or ethics or morals down straight, they just go to destroy their lives. A lot of them committed suicide. Some that didn't probably wish they could have. Not a great life. On the other hand, I've known some guys that made it to the top. Jim Neighbors, for instance, who was an usher in my parents' wedding, I got to know over the years. He found out what he wanted to do, and found out what he really wanted to do is be a singer, not really an actor. I made a second career at that. Ended up living on a estate in Hawaii. One of the happiest guys I've known him, and really he just had no problem giving up the fame when it was over, and it wasn't what he was focused on. He was focused on just having a great time, and he had a great time, as defined by not parties and alcohol and drugs, as defined by friends, family, community, and the things that he enjoyed. And those are the things I think education is really missing with kids, is really teaching them what they need to do to be alive, that to recognize they don't need to be married, they don't need to be rich, that they need to find out what it is that helps them be happy and help them be happy. And even the search for happiness is kind of painful, because it's not that. It's contentment. It's a Maslow kind of talked about it as a self-actualization, but however you define it, it's being content while still exploring other things and expanding. But if you're always chasing, if you're never content, then you're really never going to be happy. And one final piece of advice: right now, you should be planning for what you're going to do when you retire, if you're going to retire. Because one of the most disappointing things that I've seen people do is they work for retirement. They get to be my age, and they're struggling for run to retire, and then they retire and they have no clue what to do. I mean, nothing. Their life is fundamentally over, and there's no reason for that. Particularly now when we've got social networks and the rest. I mentioned the internships, and the wonder right now is you can get into a program. You can be an intern almost anywhere for anyone, because nobody's going into work. Interns sure as hell aren't going into work. So you can get these experiences, you can get to know people, you can build relationships virtually. We couldn't do that when I was a kid. When I was a kid, you had to go physically meet somebody. You had to be in the area. The next Silicon Valley may not be in any one place. It may be a virtual group of folks that get together collaboratively and figure out how to make that work. In fact, if I were building a company right now, the three areas I'd be looking at would be AI, quantum computing, and advanced collaboration and community. That last part is something we think people have cooked. They do not. The social networks are all messed up. They've lost their way. They've become kind of quasi news services, and they've damn near broken our country. That's not the goal of these services. They should be building community. They should be building relationships. They should be thinking about building that next Silicon Valley in the virtual world. That's the kind of thing we're looking for. So find your passion, find the gap, work towards that, but never forget that work-life balance. If you forget that, you're kind of done.
Thank you for your excellence and analysis. Mr. Alex, what do you want to add?
Yeah, I loved your perspective, Rob, and I'm really happy that you brought that into this conversation. The work-life balance, I think, is very important. I mean, obviously, we're doing this production to educate people about startups and how to create a business, and it collectively it helps the economy of that country. But you don't want to sacrifice people's their health or put them at risk, or all the other dangerous things that they could be doing in the workplace, or just working long work weeks just to make money. So I hope this program is not just supporting it's just supporting like a better world, and just quality of life. Money's important, but it's not always about money, and it depends on what you work for. Like some people, they go their whole life and it's just about fun, entertainment, adventures, going out and doing stuff all the time. Some people just want to work for money, and that's their whole goal. If you're lucky, you could have a balance in between having a fun career and making money, and that's exactly what you were saying. Just because your family is doctors or lawyers, it doesn't mean that you have to be a doctor or lawyer. You can go with what your interest is. Personally, I don't like spending my time on anything that's not helping the environment. So if I'm going to do something fun or do something to make money, I try to have a balance. And fortunately, being an entrepreneur, working on a lot of projects and having a diverse skill set, I have been able to work on environmental projects, have a really fun time doing my projects, and make money at the same time. And it has increased my quality of life, and I've really liked how I just set up my life, and having a lot of freedom to do whatever I want to do. I personally haven't worked for any company or corporation or main job. I haven't had a 9 to 5 for 20 years. So really long time. And I could wake up whenever I want to wake up, sleep whenever I want to sleep, work when I want to work. It's nice. One thing that hasn't been mentioned in this discussion, which I think is really good for the environment and helps people's quality of life, it helps companies be more productive, is the work week. We're seeing a lot of studies where the working 5 hours a week, 8 hours a day adds to 40 hours. And that's just difficult for people because they have to go to that business. It might be an hour commute 5 times a week, and 5 times, there and back. So that's 10 trips. That's just difficult on people. So in Europe and different places around the United States, they're trying out, the 10-hour work days, and you only work 4 days a week, and it also equates to 40 hours, but you have 3 days off. So you can go on like a little mini vacation. You can get stuff done. You have enough time to relax and be productive. I think, please don't quote me on this, but I think like Google or some other major tech company tried this, and the productivity of all the employees went up. So that's good information to know about, and how to just implement that if you're starting a company and you have employees. A lot of startups is just thinking outside of the box, doing things different, doing research, seeing where there's a problem, being creative. So it could be creating a new product, or a lot of people decide to make like another pizza chain because there's no pizza places in this area, or another coffee shop. So you could be doing something that's already been done. You could put a twist on it, do it a little different, or just do it in a location that it's not currently available. I don't like that there's food deserts around the United States and around the world where you only get really low quality, low nutrient value processed food, when you could have a startup and you can try to get healthy organic food into those areas. So that's a great startup. So when it comes to a food desert, there's also, like we talked about, ecosystems. There's like startup deserts in areas where maybe it's just like not conducive to startups and creativity. So you'd have to leave those neighborhoods. So you might not have the chance to leave the country to go to a different country if your country is driven towards one industry. We're really lucky in the United States that, like we mentioned, you can go to New York for fashion, you can go to LA for music and video production and movies and all of that. But there's also kind of like startup deserts in areas where you might not be able to leave your country, but just leave that neighborhood in that area and try to get to where there's more people that are creative, positive, like-minded, working on stuff, finding solutions. So it could even mean just like going, 5 miles one direction or 50 miles another direction. So one thing that hasn't been mentioned in this discussion are monopolies. Those are really big companies that have taken over everything, and it's hard to compete against monopolies, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible. So a lot of people don't like monopolies because they're doing the same thing, or they're doing the same thing wrong, and it's and there a large percentage of people want to support small businesses. So that's just another important keyword to know about. And then I want to oh yeah, so just moving into a different area just increases your odds of success. If you move out of one area to another area, and it might not be perfect, but it does increase your odds of success networking with other people. And then I'm fortunate here that in Santa Cruz, there's community college courses that I've taken in business. There's mentors and counselors that you can talk about business. I don't know, like MedUp was like some sort of counselor, and he was like a business counselor, and he sat down with me and he went over all this business stuff. It was like something that they offered through my school, and I learned a lot of information from that. So there's that. And just learning about how to set up the platforms. Here in Santa Cruz, where I live, I would go down to the county building, and there's a whole bunch of papers. I would grab one on the LLC, or I'd grab one on the nonprofit, and I would look at all the options and what it entailed in that information. It might not be that in other countries around the world, but you'd find out, do you got to go to the city building, the council building, the community building? Where do you got to go to get information on creating a business? And then we've been talking about startups, starting a small business. So we have mentioned venture capitalism, where you get a loan of money from, I think, one person that wants to invest in your company. There are loans, there's credit cards, which I used to be successful with what I was doing. There's other loans if you fill out for, a loan, which has a slower, a lower interest. There's working another job on the side that you don't want to do. You don't want to go to that 9 to 5 or that job to save money, but then you use it for whatever else you're creating because you need capital. A lot of people do that. They just work the job they don't want to do, and then they do their startup or what they do want to do. So that's another way. We haven't mentioned that another successful way to get money here in the United States is through GoFundMes. Having this idea, writing it down, making a video, having a GoFundMe. In other countries, they have the Kiva website that you can sign up for, what your business plan is, what you want to do with the money, and you can get a loan through there. And I would recommend checking out Kiva if you are in a developing country around the world. It's helped a lot of people. Different people around the world can donate, $1, I think $10, and it all collectively adds up, and then you get that loan. And the success rate, I think, is like really high. It's like probably like 80-90%. They just, from what I remember, like super high, maybe even higher. How many people pay back those loans from Kiva? So it's a really successful platform how they have it. I'll probably search that information right now. And then WikiHow has everything. These conversations that we're doing are wonderful, but when you're researching the computer later, just type in WikiHow to start a small business, WikiHow to start a LLC, WikiHow to start a nonprofit, and it just gives step-by-step information of what to do, what you need, and what direction to go. So that's some information I'd like to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alex. Professor Donalds, because Mr. Rob come up with a very interesting point and relevant even with the culture of Asia Pacific. What do you want to add?
Well, I want to mention a couple of things about what other people have said, because I think it was fascinating. One of the things we have in the United States, which a lot of countries don't have, is very forgiving bankruptcy laws. And basically, in some countries, if your company doesn't work out, you're on the hook to pay everybody back for all of the money. And that could make you basically a slave for the rest of your life. In the United States, there's a way that you can just write off all your debts, just walk away from them. And that can sound awful in some cultures. How could you possibly do something like that? But the fact that we can do that does allow companies to be able to basically have their debts forgiven. And I also want to talk a little bit about capital, and just because there's a little confusion, I'd like to explain different ways that you raise capital. Most countries have what are called angel investors. And what an angel investor is a person, a wealthy person who invests their own money into a company. And these investments are not loans. What they do instead is they buy a portion of your company for the money. Then the next level up is that there's companies that basically take other people's money and they invest the money for them. And they'll invest in a broad range of companies because, as we know, many of them aren't going to succeed. And so they also give you the money for a portion of your company. And those are what are called venture capitalists. So, and these are not loans, these are actually investments and because of that, you have to ask the question, how are these investors going to get their money back? I mean, if they're not loans, they're not paying interest on them, they're not getting paid back, how are they going to make money? And the answer is they have to have what's called a liquidity event. And a liquidity event is basically selling the company. And you can either sell the company to other companies, bigger companies, or you can sell them to the public markets. So what's called an initial public offering or an IPO is selling the company to the public markets and that means that it makes stock, and then regular people buy stock, and a share of stock is actually a teeny weeny little piece of the company. So those are the options. And another thing I want to say about finance is that it's very common for companies to be too successful. And let me give an example. If you're manufacturing something, you have to buy the stuff to make whatever it is that you're manufacturing. In fact, I know a company that went broke because of this. And so the way that works is if you've got customers and revenue, your company has value. And so they have people who compute the value of your company based on your revenue and the idea of how big your company might get in the future. So it's very frequent that the people that are manufacturing it, because people aren't just going to give you money forever. The people that are making this manufacturing have to set up a system where they borrow the money to buy the stuff to make whatever it is that they make, and then and the banks or whoever lends it to them know that because they're going to sell this, they're going to make a certain amount of money, and the money that they're making selling it, they're going to use to pay back the loan. If something happens, like there's a recession or something like that, all of a sudden the company winds up with a whole bunch of stuff to make things, but they don't actually, and they can make them, but they can't sell them because, or they just messed up. They thought that more people would buy them and they actually bought them. And so when you get into that situation, I mean, even if you're just selling software, what winds up happening is your company grows, you have to hire people to keep the software up to date, to expand it, you have to pay for the servers, all these expenses happen if you're successful. So one of the things that venture capitalists do is they provide funding to help you grow. And so a question that a venture capitalist is going to be asking, and an angel investor, I mean, it's kind of funny because in some countries, wealthy families become angel investors and they become the capital of that you need. In other countries, like the United States, many angel investors really aren't into the money. They're investing it and don't really care if they lose it because they're very wealthy, and they're interested in promoting the industry, promoting the business. And how could that happen? Again, you have to somehow make a connection with this person and have that person have enough trust in you and respect for your ability that they're going to be able to do that. Um, the venture capital part is very, very important because we have different rounds of funding. So there's Series A, Series B, and so on like that. And what winds up happening is that if your company gets into that situation where you're growing really, really fast, well, that's very attractive to venture capitalists because the money they invested, the company becomes worth more and more, and the money that they invested gets paid back many, many times. And so that's what the kind of source, the thing that venture capitalists provide is they provide the funding to be able to grow. And I want to go back to something we've all said, which is that you need to be where what it is that you're doing happens. And I can't overemphasize the importance of luck, serendipity. There's a wonderful book called The Luck Factor, and it's got a lot to do with openness because he did a little experiment. It was done in England where he put a 5-pound note outside. He put an ad in the paper. It said, "Are you very lucky or very unlucky? I'd like to study you," so he could do research on luck. And one of the things that he did is he put a 5-pound note outside his door, just laid it on the ground, and almost all of the lucky people found it, saw it, and almost none of the unlucky people saw it. It's amazing. He did several experiments along this way, and he developed a luck test. And the first question on the luck test is, do you find yourself talking to people in bank lines and supermarket lines? And lo and behold, the people that did that got lucky, and the people who didn't get lucky. So as Alex was saying, even if you're introverted, this is what you have to do. And the research that we've seen, and I can, post links to some of these papers. The one paper I wrote has in its footnotes lots and lots of sources about this. But the people who have the most diverse social networks, and that means groups of people who don't know each other. And the way that you do that is opening up yourself to different things. They're literally healthy. They get fewer colds. In an organization, they rise in the organization more quickly. And if you're going to be an entrepreneur, then the resources that you need when you hit that stage of growing, or when you run a problem, are going to be available to you. But if you don't, and that's why you need to go where what it is that you're doing happens. And in fact, the mention of Austin, I talked to somebody at Oracle and I said, well, are you moving to Austin? They say, no one's moving to Austin. We're just going to stay here. We're just moving our office there because the taxes in Texas are different. And so really, none of these people are actually moving to Austin. And Austin has things and even within software and technology, it's different things. And so you can look at what Austin does well. Austin's a fun town. It's got a street where every single solitary building on that street is a venue that has live music every night. So you can go from place to place for a year and never see the same thing twice. So it's fun. But again, we just can't emphasize too much how important it is to develop a variety of social networks. Oh yeah, I'm just going to tag that. Men in the United States often die very quickly after they retire. And there's actually a gene that stops expressing itself if you have too few social contact, and it's a gene in your immune system. So what winds up happening is men develop their relationships within their work environment, and then when they quit, they've lost all their social relationships. And women have a tendency to have relationships outside of their work environment. So when they retire, they still have people that they can be social about. And I have some other things to say about it, but I'd like to pass it on and hear what other people say.
Thank you, sir. Dr. William.
Well, I actually want to echo all of those, everything that the other speakers have talked about. With regard to policy and what the government, what governments can do and the policymakers out there, or future policymakers, it seems to me another part of this is economic incentives. And that would be through the levers of both lending with you if you're involved in like a central bank or central banking, as well as tax abatements, creating economic enterprise zones, so that if and when we are past COVID, or at least COVID is manageable, and for those areas where people do have to congregate in a central location, be it an office or such, for purposes of startups and entrepreneurial activities, oftentimes they don't have the money to afford a physical location, and that's where you get into co-sharing or co-work environments. And various governments at various levels, whether it's the local, the state, or the federal level, regardless of the nation, can ease those barriers to startups, at least from that point. So that's another important policy consideration. And quite frankly, it comes down to essentially this balance. Do you need the revenue up front, say from property taxes or tax incentives, versus the long-term benefit of assisting a business that's going to create jobs and or develop product, whether it's an information type of product or a manufactured product. So from a policy standpoint, you want to take into account those considerations. So essentially, for the growing economies, and for those economies that seek to be growing, what you really want to do is you want to use all of the levers of governmental authority, those areas that you regulate, those areas that you oversee, so as in order to examine the policies to lessen the barriers for the entrepreneurs and the innovators and the startups. So you're not going to be able to do everything for them. You certainly not as a governmental policymaker going to be able to provide VC funds or angel investor funds. You may not be able to necessarily provide the internships or the programs that they would need in industry-specific areas. But what you can do is you can create public-private partnerships, and that is to say that you hang on the door of the local authority. We're open for business, and what it is that they need. And so the needs of startups and innovators are distinctly different, and that's to say that you want to lower the barriers that for them to get into stuff. And so oftentimes it's going to start with upfront money. Sometimes it may be location. Other times it may be assistance with grants and funding. And then on the larger scale, it may be how the government chooses to regulate the areas that are important to that particular function. And again, net neutrality and utilizing the internet or seeing it getting more and more as a public utility and a public right. I do want to echo just on one small piece, and I know that it's been raised in some of the questions by the viewers. I want to echo something that Rob pointed out earlier, and it's really 2 points that Rob pointed out or made. And one is focus on what are we teaching the kids today in the approach to education. And so in that regard, when Rob pointed out that you want to teach the kids versatility, one of the audience members asked the question, can you teach entrepreneurship or startups or innovation in schools? And the short answer is yes and no. Yes, if you teach them to be versatile. Yes, if you teach them or show them, not necessarily in a subject-specific area, but rather that how to make the connections across curricula. Oftentimes we find that in industry areas become siloed. That is, people become highly specialized, and there's a benefit to that. But in the process of becoming highly specialized in a specific area, they lose sight of any of the lessons that could be learned from other areas. We often refer to that as being siloed. When Rob, I hope, and I don't want to speak for you, Rob, but I hope that the point is that when you talk about versatility and making cross connections and learning from various sectors of society, that versatility is what ultimately develops the skills that you need when you are either pursuing innovation or startups, because you're making connections that other people wouldn't normally see, and that is only based on the fact that you have explored areas that you didn't know. Now, this is the second point that Rob made that I want to echo, and that is this notion of work-life balance, because it's in the pursuit sometimes of these versatile approaches to life, these different silos, that you often find what makes you happy, because work-life balance is really important. Oftentimes people forget about it until you're right. You wake up one day and you look around and you say, I'm glad that I'm here, but now what do? I don't even know what kind of ice cream I like. And you don't certainly want to be in that position. So the work-life balance and finding your passion, and it may very well take you. I'm reminded of a saying that I had once heard, and I can't attribute it. I don't know who to attribute it to, but I certainly won't attribute it to myself. And it was something I had heard that I think it was in a Kurt Vonnegut speech. He said, "Listen, some of the most interesting people I know didn't know what they wanted to do until they were 40 or 50 years old." So it's not for some people, they're struck by lightning and they get it, and they're off to the races when they're very young, and attaboy and attagirl for them. Other people, you go through and you kind of figure this stuff out, because at the end of the day, you're going to be happy. And when you're happy, you're passionate. And when you're happy and passionate, you're going to wake up every day and you're going to become one of those lucky people that Donald spoke of. You're going to find the $5 pound, and the $5 bill on the ground. And you're invariably going to talk to everybody else around you because you're happy. So having cribbed off of Rob on those 2 points, sorry, Rob, I will certainly end that. But for the policymakers out there, it just seems to me there should be a laser-like focus on to tearing down or diminishing those barriers to make lives easier for startups and or those industries in your field that you want to encourage. Sharif?
Thank you. Mr. Jamid, yes.
Thank you, Sharif. Yes, all very good points of what I heard. And, government policy is important. You could be funding renewable energy sources instead of fossil fuels, for example, and some of the other things that Dr. William mentioned. But, we can't also look down our noses at the people that are going down into the coal mines to mine coal, because they are doing the best they can with what they know. They want to feed their family. They want to put clothes on their backs, and that's the way they know it. We've got to let them know that there's a better job, that they won't collect dust in their lungs in solar or some other things. We've got to change our policy, our governmental policies, to support those things that lead to better jobs, to people that don't have to suffer health consequences in order to perform those jobs. So those are things that the government has to be able to do. And I think going back to the education, we have a 19th century educational system based on an agrarian society that does not exist. So we're starting off wrong, and we're not teaching the children what they need to know. And even our technical schools, they can teach you to be a plumber, but they don't teach you how to become a plumbing business, how to become successful as a plumber. So we have to change the way we teach people from the very beginning so that they can become successes and do whatever they want, because not everyone is cut out to be an entrepreneur. Not everyone is going to start up a new company. That's why we need teams. We need people to do what they do well, what makes them happy, and then assemble that team so that you have the person who's good at marketing, you have the person who's good at accounting, you have the person that is good at generating the novel ideas that we always need, novel ideas, and together you can do it. You can make it happen. You can make it manifest. You can create your own reality by starting up here and then seeing it. And this is what we talked about Don Quixote the last time. Don Quixote saw things that other people did not. And yeah, you can say he's crazy, or you can say, yeah, that's the way it is, but it can be done better. So this is the motivation that we want to speak to. And you will encounter anti-change agents, whatever you're trying to do. Whenever you're trying to make a change, there will be anti-change agents. So the other quality that we need is perseverance. We need to persevere in the face of these anti-change agents, whether they're coming from a monopoly that won't let you compete, won't let you get started, whether it's coming from a governmental policy that supports somebody that you are trying to change and do something different. Whatever the anti-change agents are, they will be out there, you will encounter them, and you must persevere. So these are the things that you have to have and I also want to talk a little bit about other cultures besides the culture that I grew up in. Many of those cultures have great respect for their ancestors, great respect for the way things have been done in the past. And I'm not going to sit in judgment of that, but I'm telling you how it works in the United States, how it works in startups in the United States. And it means that the person who says, but that's the way we've always done it, is the first person you have to let go. because it's got to be done differently. And it can't be done the way it was if you're going to be successful in a startup, if you're going to have an innovation and see it turn into a reality. So these are the things that I want people to take away from there. And the other thing is, the luck thing, I love that. Because all of us will see opportunities, but not all of us will realize them when they're in front of us. And not all of us will seize them when they manifest themselves in front of our faces. So when the opportunity is there, you have to prepare yourself to be ready to see it and to take it. And this is why I say work on yourself first, hone your skills, and be ready when opportunity comes. So you're prepared. Prepare yourself. And then look at your community next. Help your community. And then keep going. And everyone keep going. And everybody's all on the same side. All the oars are being pulled in the same direction. The boat will move. So thank you very much, Sharif.
Thank you. Mr. Rob, I have one question. Even there are many audience, they are actually come up with the different questions based on entrepreneurships and other point. Now, millions of people, because of COVID, they're losing their job. And in that situation in Asia Pacific, we are observing startup and this kind of activities actually growing very fast, very, very fast. So in that situations, what your advice, what area they should focus? Like example, what type of startup, like example, startup based on healthcare, startup based on digital worlds, or what area you can advise the youth community they should focus and they should solve the problem and they will get more success?
Well, so startups aren't for everybody. I mean, the idea of doing a startup's a lot of fun. Clearly, I've done a number of them myself, and I work for myself at this time, and I'm extremely happy. But a lot of folks don't do well in startups, and I think the first step is to understand whether the startup is the right path for you. Startups require a very high level of commitment, a lot of flexibility and diversity, and I mean with regard to skill set, and a lot of willingness to take on risk, because most startups fail. And so you've got to be willing to do all that stuff. Now, I will say categorically, a startup experience looks really good on a resume. So it's good to go through the process if you can weather the storm. But if you need a lot of oversight, if you need a lot of structure, and a lot of people do need both those things, then startups really aren't for you. Now, as far as focusing on where, if you're going to do a startup, where it ought to be, you should start off with your core skill set. I mean, you don't start off with the opportunity yet. You figure out what it is you know, what it is you do well, and then you see if there's an opportunity that's close to that. And if there isn't, maybe you need to change your skill set, or maybe you need to think about going to work for somebody else and not doing a startup. I see an awful lot of folks doing two things wrong. One, trying to do a startup in an area they don't understand, and the other is trying to do a startup in an area that's already saturated. Neither one of those things is going to be very successful. We had a discussion on luck in the past. The way to make luck work is you work with the odds, not against the odds. So you work towards an area that you have knowledge in. You work towards an area where there are clear gaps in terms of technology or product. And then your probability of success is a lot higher than if you work in an area you have no knowledge in, and an area that's saturated. The odds of success are going to be far less. So you learn the odds. And I think everybody ought to take Monte Carlo theory as part of their undergraduate work, so they fundamentally understand odds. You learn real quick that gambling in places like Las Vegas are a bad idea just because of the math. And if you can understand the math, it will help you make decisions with regard to your life, your career, and your company that will make a difference. Now, if I, as I mentioned before, if I was doing a startup, I'd be looking at three areas. I'd be looking at AI. I'd be looking at quantum computing. I had a third one and I completely blanked on it, but I'll come back to it. But that's because that's where my knowledge base is. What?
Advanced collaborative.
Advanced collaborative. Thank you. Advanced collaboration. But that's where my knowledge base is. That's what I know. So it really should start with the skills that you have, and then move into an area where you see a gap. we're in the opportunity for startups has never been greater than it is right now. Robotics, for instance, which falls out of AI for me, is a huge area because of COVID. Folks are discovering that, robots don't get sick. We've got a lot of discussion here in the States about minimum wage and job displacement. Right now, the risk on job displacement has nothing to do with minimum wage. It has everything to do with the virus. That's what's driving a lot of particularly the blue collar replacement, because you've got a choice as a company manager of being open or closed. Robots can allow it so you're open and making revenue. Right now, in a number of areas, people-based businesses are having to close because of the COVID close proximity. Now, another thing to work on is figure out a way for a comfortable PPE, the protective gear, an unusual problem. A common problem that has been solved that somehow isn't propagating through the ecosystem. I'll give you a point. In fabs, which are the factories that make microprocessors, people wear things called bunny suits. Bunny suits have evolved tremendously over the last 20 years to allow for comfort, allow for movement, and they do not only protect the manufacturing line from contaminants, they protect the people from contaminants as well. This is an area that now a lot of startups I'm watching are starting to explore. How do we turn this protective gear designed for other areas into a broader market that needs to have people going into places and still be protected from a mutating virus? If you're into clothing, if you're into that kind of stuff, that's an ideal area to start exploring now, because it's your expertise and there's a clear need to solve the underlying problem. So that's kind of how you have to go through it. And if we're back to schools, what you teach is problem solving, stepping back and saying, here are a set of conditions. I want to accomplish a goal. How do I take these conditions? How do I take these resources, and how do I use them with the resources I've access to solve that underlying problem? It is often nonlinear, but problem solving skills are undertaught. In my own experience, I had two classes in calculus. The first one was theoretical calculus, and one of the only failures I ever had in school, and particularly in math, where I tended to excel, was in theoretical calculus. The other one was applied calculus, second highest grade in the class. The difference for me is I could see how to use the tools, and that made it real for me. The theoretical calculus didn't work. Same thing for everybody else. You have a set of core skills, likes, and desires that you can use to apply and find out what it is you are good at. And you will do better at things you're good at than things that you are not good at. But you need to know what that stuff is. And you'll do better at things that you enjoy and less well at things that you don't enjoy. But you need to know what those things are. And schools really do need to go through a process. And we were doing that in the United States back in the 1970s very aggressively. And then some very ill-conceived EOC rules came through and destroyed the programs because they were inherently discriminatory. And they were discriminatory because the schools themselves weren't stepping up to the problem. That's a whole nother issue. We won't go there. But in the end, if you know, I'm probably going to be quoting Sun Tzu here for a second, but Sun Tzu said, if you know your opponent, if you know yourself, you will always win. If you don't know your opponent and you don't know yourself, you will pretty much always lose. And in this particular case, your opponent is kind of your career and your advancement. If you understand where it is you want to go, if you understand your skills, then you have a much better chance of being successful than if you don't. And an awful lot of kids are coming out of school and they're pretty much clueless on these basics. And by the way, I'll provide one other piece of advice that I followed when I was going through school, and that is make sure you also learn living skills. Home economics may sound like a girl's course, but if you're out on your own, you need to know how to cook. You need to know how to clean. You need those basic things. And by the way, home economics is a great place to go to meet women because there aren't a lot of guys in that class. Side thing, nothing to do with work, but I will point out that there are other opportunities to taking those classes. But at the end, you're trying to groom yourself for a life that's going to be full of change. We are going through unprecedented change at this time. If you can teach yourself how to deal with that change and roll with the blows, you'll do so much better and you'll be so much happier than if you lock in, specialize, and that specialty goes south. Because I've known a lot of people in this industry, the computer industry, that specialized in certain areas, and then that specialization fell out of favor, and they're lost because they never learned how to be flexible. You mentioned innovation. One of the things that you have, if you're going to be innovative, You have to learn to be flexible. As a race, by nature, we don't like change, which is really bizarre because we're going through tons of it. We tend to go through tons of change, but we don't like it. You have to untrain that tendency to dislike change if you want to live in an innovative environment. If you are that person and you can't change, that is not the place for you. You will fail and you'll make everybody else on your team miserable. So just know yourself, know where you want to go. As others have pointed out, relationships are king. The things that if you are laid off, what will save you is your Rolodex. If you have a strong Rolodex, you do well. If you don't have a strong Rolodex, once again, the odds roll against you. Know your odds, know where you're going, know your skills, and you'll do fine.
Thank you, Mr. Rob. Mr. Alex.
Yes. Hey, Rob, can I just clarify for the viewers? A Rolodex just means like you have a lot of contacts, right?
Yes. Sorry, I
okay.
used a very old term that
okay.
That age me. But Rolodex, be clear, Rolodex was the way we've always talked about that particular.
Okay. Cool.
Have a portfolio of friends and acquaintances.
Okay, so a Rolodex was like this thing that you would have a lot of phone numbers in, so you'd roll
business
through
card.
it and you would call people, business cards and stuff like that. So yeah, a lot of contacts. So I agree with Rob, but the 3 areas that he mentioned would not work for me, and they don't work for anyone. Those aren't my 3 areas or my 10 areas because I have a lot of stuff going on. So yeah, just trying and figuring out what works best for you. Donald did mention bankruptcy, and that does happen a lot in the United States. It does allow companies, corporations, individuals to gather a lot of debt, trying a certain venture or startup, and then if they're unsuccessful, they can file bankruptcy and kind of like start over. So that's really interesting that you pointed that out, because yeah, they don't have that in a lot of other countries. And then they're constantly in debt. And unfortunately, as we saw, I believe in India and other countries around the world, when they get into debt, a large percentage of them commit suicide. We saw that with the debt that they owed Monsanto and some of the seed companies. So we have mentioned in this conversation just trying, and that's also just really important. You're going to fail at a lot of things throughout your life. You just have to be strong, optimistic, and persevere, and just continually again, adapt. If something's not working out, you do something different, and you keep trying. I mean, you can continue to change things and continue that route, but I usually jump to different things and I keep trying until I get it correct. So Donald mentioned a venture capitalist, and one source of information if you want to kind of see how things are done in the United States. I don't know if everyone has access to or knows about the show Shark Tank. It talks about a lot of venture capitalists, and I've only watched maybe 2 or 3 of the shows because I don't watch a lot of TV. I think I was at a friend's house or something. So Shark Tank, you could learn a lot from that show about how that works. So I do want to mention, as I've mentioned in other shows, the Bureau of Labor Statistics Occupational Outlook website. This is in the United States. It's put together from a wide range of data and statistics and information and all the census information, and they put together this website in the United States. Sharif, if you have a chance to pull up the one with fastest growing businesses that I sent to you. So what this website is it shows where there's going to be jobs, how many, what the pay is. There's little descriptions if people like their job, if they don't like the job. So it's really interesting. As in the United States, we're seeing a lot more baby boomers that are increasing around the United States. We're seeing more need for home healthcare nurses, home healthcare aides. So that's there's more of those jobs available than like any other jobs. I think I was just on the website and it was in the millions, or that's how many they're going to increase. So I don't know, it's super high. I have that right here. So new jobs, yeah, 1 million new jobs. That's maybe going into the next year. Unfortunately, that pays really low. That pays $25,000 a year. So if you go to the fastest growing job on this website, again, Occupational Outlook, is really cool. Wind turbine service technicians. Just knowing about electricity, taking some courses, in electricity, and just applying for that job, maybe some internships. So that's really cool. That's increased 61%. So the second fastest growing job is nurse practitioners, but the third one, again, this is so exciting, is solar panel installation, basically. So that's 51% increase. I learned about this and these increases when I took the solar technology course at Cabrillo College here in Santa Cruz. So it's really amazing to see, 5 years, 7 years later, that it's still growing. So I hope people are watching and they listen to this potential idea that they could do to make money. They could do this around the world. They could have this business. You don't need a lot of supplies. As I just mentioned, solar panels are increasing around the world. So this job is really good. It's really environmental. It's figuring out how to clean solar panels, how to do it safely and correctly, and getting a team together or doing it individually. Solar panels lose their efficiency when trees grow over them, but more likely when dust and debris lands on the solar panels, whether it's 5%, 20%. Whenever there's dust, they need to be cleaned. Homeowners neglect to do this. Businesses neglect to do this. Companies and corporations. Then they'll see the decrease in electrical energy that's being created, and that's also getting fed back to the system. So, my recommendation would be to make go out and take some pictures of some solar panels, make a little infographic or a little flyer in Photoshop or one of those apps, and start a job just going around. All you need is the harness to do the roof safely. You need a ladder, you need some water and a bucket, and you just go up there and clean panels, and it would help with climate change and everything. So that's a job that I would definitely recommend. I think we're going to need more of those, and it's a cool thing. When you're thinking about a new job or venture, remember there's goods and services. Just, are you going to provide a service? Are you going to provide a good? Are you going to be creating something? Before I would create a new job, I would think, can I travel the world doing it? Can I go to this country, that country? Can I move? Can I relocate? Or is my job only in this location? Am I going to be limited? How many tools am I going to need? Am I going to need, just a few amount of tools, or am I going to need a huge amount, machines and equipment and a location to store all of them, a location to store all the paperwork and all of that? So I did want to mention some of those things. My skill sets are really cool because I used to do photography. I used to, play on website design programs and do Photoshop and video editing. So all of those now go so well with all of my marketing, knowing how to take pictures, website design, video production, and Photoshop. All of that I could do on my own, so I don't have to spend all of this money paying someone to do those things. Regardless if I'm advertising on TV or social media, on a website, it's just a good thing to have. We've had conversations about communication. That's also really important. Goes along with your skill set. Staying organized is really important. Just having your business cards, your notes, your flyers, your paperwork, all of your stuff. Having your life organized and your paperwork and everything like that. Time management is another really important thing. What are you going to do? The most successful people, like Bill Gates and Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, all these people, they didn't go out every single weekend partying and drinking or watching TV shows and playing sports and doing all this. They focused on what they wanted to do, and they became, some of the wealthiest people in the world. So time management, you don't have to dedicate 99% of your time, but you do have to be knowledgeable of time management, what's wasting your time and what's causing you to be unproductive. Education's another important thing. Watching documentaries, watching YouTube videos, reading research, like Donald says, talking to people, gaining information and knowledge from other people, just that increases your skill sets. And then James was just mentioning, don't let people shoot you down. If you're motivated, stay inspired, be inspired. Don't let people, get in your way or, discredit you and all of that, because you're the one that's going to make a difference. We have talked about universal basic income, UBI, in the past. And I think the countries that have that are really fortunate, because then they can get that money every month and then they could put a small percentage or a large percentage towards what they're working on, but then they could do their entrepreneurial ideas. They can work on their, new business, and they can continue to be more resilient. If one doesn't work out, they can, just be frugal with their money and then go to the next one. So I think universal basic income would help the economy, because more people would be starting new businesses. And that's all I wanted to add for this.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor Donald.
Well, there's been a lot of questions about innovation. And I think that when we think about it, we put innovation and creativity in similar bag. However, I want to make an observation about innovation and creativity that'll probably surprise you. It doesn't come from a person. It doesn't come from a company. It comes from the judgment of society. Like, for instance, I knew this guy. I have limited vision and can't drive. And so he was driving me to some stuff over in Silicon Valley. And I hired him. And he said he was a musician. And I said, well, what kind of music do you make? And he said, it's a secret. I don't want people to steal it from me. And I was like, he says, I'm very creative. And I'm like, how? You're creative. You're creative when people say you're creative. I mean, what's the difference between just taking a bunch of your leftover vegetables and burning them in the, I mean, that's something nobody else has ever, very few people do on purpose. So that's a good reason. That's the importance of being able to get feedback from the people around you on a consistent basis, because just being random isn't being creative. And on that vein, I want to say something about social structure. We're social animals, and we have hierarchies that happen whether we want them to or not. As an actor, I know James knows about Keith Johnstone in improv, and Keith Johnstone said that in every human transaction, there's a status element to it. And the way we work it and solve it is that we switch what we're talking about. So somebody might be higher status in guitar playing when in your group of guitar playing, but then you switch to start talking about computer programming or literature or something like that. And everybody's got things that they're better at. So we just kind of bounce around, going back and forth. However, it's been found that people that are chronically low status, they're poor, they're uneducated, they're from a racial minority that is basically kept down on purpose and things like that, really wind up having worse health, and they feel worse about themselves. I mean, they feel bad, but they don't live as long, they're more likely to get sick. It's not healthy. However, so for the thing about doing what you're good at isn't just you, it's also the society that you live in. For example, we talked about people working 12-hour days in Silicon Valley. Well, they have a system where they get people right out of college that don't know any better, and they pay them a fixed wage, which seems very high, and then they work them to death. They literally have sleeping pods at Google, so people could stay there all night working and then go in and crash and come back out. And people can't do that for a while. So they look at somebody my age, and I've had a lot of experience doing software engineering, but they wouldn't hire me. I'm smart enough to know how much they're supposed to pay me. And I'm not going to kill myself working 12-hour days anymore. So they don't want me. So what do? I mean, it's baked in. I mean, social structure is very stable. So this is a stable thing that's happening in Silicon Valley. So what I did is I started getting into teaching software engineering. And lo and behold, in many cultures, teachers have a great deal of respect. So I love classes where most of my students are Indians and Chinese, because the fact that I'm older and I'm a teacher makes them very respectful of me. I mean, I love it. It's fun. And all of a sudden, I'm still high status, and it's something I can do until I die. So whatever you're doing as a person, you can be cognizant of the fact that this status thing does affect us. It affects us emotionally, and it affects us in a lot of other ways, but that you can change. You can be somebody different. You can change yourself. I want to talk about also incubators, which we've talked about. Let me just finish what I'm saying about, give a little bit more about innovation. So in order to get that judgment, you have to do something that people appreciate. And a lot of times innovation is going to take place. It's not something that you can manufacture or engineer. And a lot of times innovators don't even know they're being innovative while they're doing innovation. They don't even know they're being creative. They're just found some problem that's in their life, and they solve this problem. And then people around them say, well, that's really innovative. You've done this amazing thing. And so then they can gather the people around them. And I really want to emphasize that one of the things that people cause companies to fail a lot is when you get one person who thinks that they know everything, and they don't build the relationships that they need to build to be successful. You get the egotistical CEO, and I've had that problem myself. I understand exactly why it doesn't work out. I want to mention incubators briefly, because they're a way that governments can invest, and they do. There's gigantic incubators in Toronto. There's incubators in Helsinki. There's incubators, and these are things where the government provides office space, legal counsel, things like that at a lower cost than they would get it otherwise. And so if we're looking at what governments do, I will mention about taxes that I once heard a venture capitalist say, there has never been a company that we've invested in that we invested in because they had a strategy to get lower taxes. It's just not what we're interested in. I also want to say within this social structure that if you're inside of an organization or system, and organizations exist to prevent innovation, that's what they do. They don't want the people inside of the organization doing their own thing. They want them to be doing things on behalf of the organization. And so they're part of their existence is just to prevent change, prevent innovation. However, I mean, so in a lot of countries, the best goal that you can have is to go to work for a big company. I mean, you've got more job security, status. There's all these particular things that you have within that inside
Healthcare,
of that
medical.
Thank you.
So if you're going to
Thank you.
I'm going to say one more thing. So if you're going to be an innovator, you're going to be outside of that, and it's going to make you feel weird. You won't have that support and that social sort of support. So that's something you have to be able to realize and think about.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. William.
Well,
Can you?
yeah, no. Can you hear me now? I was on
Yes.
mute. Well, I guess I'll echo. I guess what the other guests have said. I do think this though, that it takes a team, it takes a village, just to use old cliches, in order to build whether any venture or any organization. Some of my experience comes from the political field, which is putting together organizations on a voluntary basis where people are motivated by a desire to achieve a common goal. And in some respects, those same dynamics occur in startups where people get together, which I think just underscores the importance of at least one of the areas that Rob pointed out earlier, which is the advancement of the collaboration and community-based areas as one of the three areas that he would see where the hockey puck is going, so to say, to use a hockey analogy, or where you ought to be looking, moving towards the future. That is important, but there is the infrastructure that I just want to emphasize with the policymakers on this point, and that is to build the infrastructure to support the very creative people that will find themselves pursuing their dreams and their passions. And at least from a governmental point of view, the notion of government, and I on this point, I do want to make this fundamental difference. In the past, there's been a dialogue between less regulation or more regulation, but that's no longer the dynamic. The forces that motivated that kind of debate really don't apply today in terms of less regulation or more regulation. It's really about smart regulation or smart policies, and it's about finding out what it is that you want to encourage and then utilizing the levers of governmental power or authority to engage and enhance that. For example, domestically here in the United States, with the new administration, just yesterday, I believe, the president exercised one of the most fundamental authorities that he had, and that was to issue an executive order to tell the American government to buy American. I mean, if nothing else, that is a policy change. It's a slight one. Everybody always says buy American, at least domestically. But here he said that it's going to be the policy of the United States government and anything that they spend, and that is to place a priority on buying American-made products. Now, that one small policy change is going to impact and have a ripple effect throughout the economy in terms of what the United States government buys and purchases, which is just about everything, from cars, trucks, computers to, information hardware, all that stuff, pens and pencils and staplers. Now, the same is true for the Asian Pacific countries. When you are in a position as a policy maker to make a decision, if you want to both stop harms in your economy, whether it's the overusage of fossil fuels to deal with climate change or to deal with the environment, you can make a decision as a policymaker when you are in charge of the government for the time that you have that honor that will encourage those areas. If you are in governmental authority or an NGO, and you have a chance to make a policy decision that will favor lowering the barriers or the impediments to assisting a business with an incubator, whether it's taxes or not, and whoever cares about what everybody else's innovations, but your job as a policymaker is to lower those barriers and create the very conditions by which someone coming in can be successful. Because you don't want them to fail just because they stubbed their toe because they didn't get the right permit. That seems to be counterintuitive. And so your job as a policymaker is to ensure that your policies, that which you can control, like buy American or buy Malaysian, or in Singapore, it could be information knowledge transferring and what the rules are with regard to protection of patents and intellectual property. All those things are important. And so there are a myriad of ways that you can do that. And I can't underscore that enough. And so collaboration, and from a policy standpoint, making sure that the things that you decide and that you make decisions on emphasize the collective good in the directions and reflect the values of where you think and you believe that society ought to be going. Clean energy, cleaner air, sustainability, all of those, because quite frankly, you've seen how effective it is, because those people in your same positions 100 or 200, 150 years ago made the same policy decisions to favor oil over electricity. And we are now, the beneficiaries and or responsible for the tragedies of those policy decisions when it comes to climate change. And you're at a point now where you can make those decisions, both on lowering the barriers for startups and innovations and assisting it by removing the government as a barrier and or creating conditions where they can go and they can find a happy place and be successful because they don't have to fight so hard or they can just concentrate on the challenges that they will have inherently as a startup. Sharif?
Thank you. Mr. Jamid.
Thank you, Sharif. And once again, congratulations on your 200th show. Very impressive. I wanted to say you must be adaptable when you're going out into the world. I had a classical liberal arts education. I got a master's degree in organization development, which is field of human resources, but I could only make my living with computers. And it was all right with me because, if you put the zeros and ones in the wrong order, they didn't function. If you put them in the right order, they did function. And then they didn't have any emotional baggage. They didn't have any bad days. So they were easier for me to understand and to work with. But then I just had to keep changing. So work on yourself first. And I have to say that, one of the things that you want to know is that your ego is not your amigo. And you must develop objectivity. You must be saying, it's not, I want to do this, it's not working, I have to stop doing that and try something else. Objectivity will be your best friend, but your ego will not be. And I do think that, we want to talk about a couple of things that made a difference in my life. And I did want to talk about them. And one was one of the proudest days to be an United States citizen in Americas, was when Reagan said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. And that's why this wall is in my background. It's a constant reminder to me that there will be walls, and you can try to butt your head against them. You can try and huff and puff and blow them down, but you have to use your head to tear them down. And if you stay on the sidelines, you might as well just be another brick in the wall. So do what you can to change yourself, adapt to the circumstances around you, and work to breaking down the walls between us. Whatever country, whatever culture we come from, whatever language we speak, it just doesn't matter. Tear down the walls, innovate, be creative, do all the things that you can do. And if you just have to, all you can do is do accounting, all you can do is do this or that, then get somebody that's making a change in society, because don't settle for what is. See what could be and make it happen. Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you. I directly want to go for the claimers. Before that, I just want to share World Talent Economy Forum, Al Noor Academy Sarhadiya Barhad, as well as Asia Research and Development Institute. We are working together. We do more focus on academy and educations. And beside that, we are trying to solve the social problem with the help of global community. And I want to give special thanks to the speakers, those who joins in World Talent Economy Forum, as well as the audience, those who always support us, and the youth community, those who help us to grow every day. So I directly want to go from the concluding remarks. I start with Professor Donald, then Mr. Alex, then Mr. James, then Dr. William, and finally Mr. Rob. Professor Donald.
Okay, I want to quickly answer one of the questions and then go to my concluding remarks is how do you measure innovation? And that's a tough thing to do. And in sociology, most of the papers that measure innovation do it by number of patents. So for an instance, we say Finland is being very, very innovative, and that's because they are patenting a lot of stuff. That's a very rough measure because you have to have the right legal system and things like that to be able to pull that off. And that's true with farming or anything else. What I want to piggyback off of something James said is that one of the ways that you can be happy and calm and be and have a better life is to realize that you are not your thoughts. People often will say to themselves, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm this, I'm that. And what's going on? You're having this thought. Where does that thought come from? Is that from you, or is that from the social structure that you're in, or your past, your history, the way people have talked about you? But it's not, it's just a thought. It isn't real. And so what you really have to work on yourself, and if you just work on one thing, train yourself to watch your thoughts just go by. I mean, you have a thought, sometimes it's in somebody else's voice or your own voice. Just give that voice a name. Call it George. Okay, George, thank you so much for that thought. I really appreciate the advice. And then take it just like advice from anyone. because your unconscious mind stuff is bubbling up all the time, and a lot of it comes from other people. And so if you learn to just realize that you are not your thoughts, and then since you're not your thoughts, any thought is allowed, because none of them are real. So what you can do is switch the kind of thoughts that you have. And one way to do it is just take a piece of paper and write down a positive thought 10 times. It trains your brain to have that thought. The thought is, I can be successful. I am a creative person. I am an innovative person. People really like me. Write that 10 times and just do it for a couple of days. And on that same vein, I keep talking about networking. And the way that I've been the most successful at networking is by asking the question, what I can do for other people. Some people say Donald knows everybody, and in a joke, in a funny way, because, well, it's too long of a story, so I won't share it here. But the point of the matter is you go to a meetup, walk up to that meetup and say, what can I do to help you? How can I help? And they need somebody to take the tickets at the door, somebody to do this, somebody to do that. They always need people. So walk up and do that. Just walk. And even if you're introverted, it sort of forces you into a new situation. And yeah, that's nobody is going to dislike you if you walk up and ask how you can help them. Never. It's not going to happen. And
thank you.
So
sorry,
that's
please
what
continue.
I need to say.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Donald. Alex, yes.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. As what Donald was just saying, yeah, just don't be intimidated and just be confident. I think that's a huge skill that a lot of entrepreneurs and people that are successful, that's just a good skill to have. Just being confident. And I also wanted to mention, if something's interfering with what you're doing, with what your goal is, with what you're trying to accomplish, with what you're trying to create, just try to think like, well, what is that? What's slowing me down? And Donald just mentioned, if it's in your head, find a solution. If it's someone in your life, if it's where you live, if it's the low quality food that you're eating, if it's your time management, whatever it is, just not just thinking about solutions, but also thinking about, well, what are the problems over here that's limiting me from creating this, and then trying to address those problems. So I do want to mention that we have a lot of options with different directions we can go in life, where we choose to go, how we spend our time, and we all create our future. Of course, there's some things that are outside of our control, things that we have no control of, that happen to us, that affect us, that interfere with our life, our quality of life, our goals, our objectives. But for the most part, we create our own future. So just understanding that how much control you have over your life between the decisions that you make every single day, and how important that is. And collectively, if we're all making the right decisions, it helps change the direction of an entire community or an entire region. So we are going through a huge shift. Even though Rob mentioned AI and technology and stuff, we're going through a huge shift towards environmentalism, eco projects, products, sustainability, all of that. So whatever you're gonna go towards, I would also recommend anything environmental is going to be huge, and you're most likely to be way more successful than something that's not sustainable, because it's a shift that the entire world is going through. So that's very important to acknowledge, and then hopefully incorporate in your business plan or whatever direction you choose to go. So I do want to just congratulate you, Sharif. Thank you very much from all of us. 200 shows, your dedication, listening to everything that we have to say, gathering all of these speakers, reaching a larger audience with our message, and the knowledge that we're trying to get out to more people. So thank you. It's a huge accomplishment. Congratulations. So the last thing that I want to say. You're welcome, Sharif. So all of my projects I do to try to help people, animals, or the environment. I try not to waste my time on anything that's not solving those things, because then I just feel selfish. So homelessness is a problem around the world, and so I have gone in different humanitarian missions and projects to help them in different places, and I try to think that, you know, what I can do to help them. So since I've known that homelessness is a problem, I used all of my skill sets, and I recently came up with this new project. Now, this project raised $5,100 on a GoFundMe in about 2 weeks. So this is my project right here. I'm now creating these micro tiny homes for homeless people, and I'm giving them to them for free. There's my website. So it has a solar panel on the roof. It's actually to help raise awareness of minimalism rather than sleeping out on the streets and in the rain, where a lot of disabled people are just sleeping in the streets. The first one was actually given to a guy in a wheelchair. So they're insulated on the inside. This is compostable, composition of recycled material. They're warm. They lock on the outside. They can secure their stuff. They could be locked up somewhere. So this is a project that raised so much money and so much attention in a short amount of time. I hope more people take my designs on my website that are available for free, and they build these, and they get funding through government, through nonprofits, through a team, or just build them on your own. This is a really successful project that's got a lot of attention, and I think more people can have success duplicating this design in different places around the world for free. All of this information is available open source, just like Elon Musk, because there's a problem of homelessness, and this is a huge solution. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alex. You're really doing great jobs, Mr. Jamsit.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Sharif. And I want to just say that, excuse me, I'm amazed at your ability to put together 200 shows. I did want to talk about what Professor Donald brought up, because I've always been saying, change yourself first. And, you know, he talked about the thoughts that can hold you back. You can change yourself. I was confirmed as a Roman Catholic. Now my spiritual advisor is a Vedic Indian yogi. And, you know, I gave a name to those voices in my head. I called it Dr. Strange, because before Dr. Strange became a mystic, he was a surgeon, and he wanted everything to be perfect. And that was the way I was. I wanted everything. And I told myself, if I did it fast enough, I could have done it better. If I did it well enough, I could have done it faster. And so I was always my own worst critic. And I'm a much calmer, more serene person now, because I've named it, and I've told Dr. Strange to go to sleep. And you can do this too. Whatever's holding you back, whatever you think of yourself, if you don't think you're good enough, you are good enough. You're okay. And okay is good enough. So this is what the message I want. Don't get discouraged. Keep going. Keep doing the perseverance. I mentioned how proud I was of President Reagan when he said to tear down the wall. Well, that was just how miserable I was when we had a president say, build the wall. You know, so there are things that matter here. Governmental policy does matter. We want to be doing the best thing. And we want to tear down the walls between us. And that could be internet connectivity. That could be many things. But what we don't want to do is just focus, just drift, and just be another brick in the wall. We want to tear the walls between us down. And thank you so much for Sharif. I've learned so much from your other guests and from you.
Thank you, Dr. William.
Okay, well, tough acts to follow. It is a testament, and I'll begin with this. It's a testament to the 200 shows and the commitment of reflection of your commitment, Sharif, because everybody that's talented wants to be a part of it. And I think in this respect, you are a prime example of a startup and or innovation. Right. There are often places where people can go and seek advice, but here at the World Talent Economy Forum, you seem to bring out the best for over 1 million students. And so I also want to congratulate on this 200th episode that those 1 million students that are out there and the students that are soon to come. So I've often enjoyed. I guess what I want to just kind of end with is, quickly, is just 2 points. Think of yourself in this emerging world with regard to either your startup or your innovation. Certainly take into account all of the other advice and suggestions. It's all well-founded that the other guests have already shared with you. But you should look at it as you're an arbitrator of information. You're the information middle person. When you want to start up a company, obviously you have a desire, whether to improve or affect homelessness. Now, Alex saw a problem, and then Alex then turned around and looked at all the other ideas and things that are out there, and then came up with this project. He then shared that project with other people, got crowdfunding, and now it's a reality. That is an example of a startup, and that's an example of innovation. Sharif, you're an example of a startup and innovation in the intellectual arena or the information age. So I just want to point out that when I began, I talked about being an information middle person, a middleman or middle woman in today's economy, and taking the information through the unprecedented access that you have with internet and through the collaborative points and ideas that Rob has raised. And it's really being at that inflection point where you can then get the right information to the right people, whether through your Rolodex or through your phone contact list or through your Facebook connection, whatever it is. It's being the information transfer to that affect the particular areas that you want to go in. And then I just want to underscore, having the passion for what you do is absolutely correct. I mean, who knows if, depending on your spiritual sense of it, who knows if there's an afterlife, who knows if we're reincarnated. I mean, but if this is our one go round, I mean, don't you want to have a good time going around doing it? And I mean, really enjoying with a passion every single day that you wake up to do, like Alex, who I know has evidenced his, and Alex, I don't mean to embarrass you, but he's got tattoos to demonstrate his passion for his cause. And that's the kind of empowered life that you want.
Are you saying I should get this tattooed on me next?
No.
Okay. Tempting.
But I do want to simply say that it's that kind of passion that you see beaming from Sharif and beaming from Alex and beaming from Jim and Donald and Rob. But information, middle person, live your life, go after your passion, and accept that you may fail, but at the end of the day, if you can laugh about it, share about it, and share stories and grow, then you're going to be in great stead. And part of the process of startup and innovation is the unknown. So it's not for the faint of heart, but yeah, go ahead and do it and just go after it. So thank you again, Sharif, for letting me be a part of the 200th episode of the World Talent Economy Forum. It's certainly impressive, and what is it, 20 million next, and then 100 million by the end of the year, Sharif. So tip of my hat.
Thank you, Dr. William. Mr. Rob.
Well, thanks. Final comments. What it took me a long time to learn is, and we've got kind of a comment that has to do with, shooting, but there's a way I used to compete in combat. And what we used to say on some of the other things is what you want to do is ready, aim, fire. That's the sequence. What a lot of people do with regard to their careers is they fire, then they think about ready and aiming. It doesn't end well. You want to spend your time now really thinking through what you'd like your future to be. What is the life you'd like to have? Spend some time looking at families. Do you really want kids? Are kids part? You don't have kids just to have kids. There needs to be a bit deeper reason. And on your career path, are you going to spend the time with those children so at the end those relationships will be preserved, or will they simply be burdens and mistakes for the rest of your life? There are families that are together, families that are apart. And during this time of COVID, it's particularly noticeable about those of us that have built our families properly, because they come together, they support each other, and those that didn't have that experience, they don't have that support structure, and they're the ones that are in the retirement communities the kids aren't calling and they're not spending any time with. And so my view is design the end of your life at the beginning of your life, and you're much more likely to have a full and complete life. Think about where it is you want to be when you're my age, and you have a much better chance of getting there if you start that process early. And that includes things like savings. That includes things like, meeting the right people and recognizing that if you do something really wrong, that's going to carry through for the rest of your life. Committing a felony, for instance, will deny you career paths that you might have enjoyed, but you can't get around in. By the way, here, a felony is a major crime that typically leads to 1 or more years in prison. And once it's on your record, you can't do things like vote, you can't work for government, you can't work for an awful lot of agencies. And so those kinds of mistakes made early on can cripple your future. So your goal right now, if you haven't already done it, is figure out where you want to be when you're my age, and then put together a plan to get there. And that plan should be flexible, because we really don't know what's going to happen over the next 50 or 60 years. We don't. And those that will survive that are the people that can deal with change, that can shift with the times, that can roll with the punches. Those that are rigid, those that are cubbyhole, those that have a very narrow skill set, they are at much more risk. But I will tell you this, even those people, if they have a strong family structure, can get through. If they don't, they won't. So think about that now, and you'll do better. And Sharif, once again, congratulations on 200 shows.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. And thank you, sir, for all of your support. And especially, I want to give special thanks to my teams, Sohel, Rana, Humaira, Tanzila, and all of the team members, those who are working. And the speakers. Speakers are very important, those who continuously support us, because your knowledge, your experience is important for our audience. And I know many of the school, college, university, already they are communicating, they're sharing our content, many audience joinings, they're already sharing our contents. So I want to give special thanks. So with your support, we will reach 100 million people. And in my personal life, I know millions and millions of people, they are outside of internet. They never utilize internet. They are in remote area. So my life objective is that we have to reach these millions of people. I know there are many talented people. There are many talented people in madrasa education system, but they are not in mainstream. This is our objective. We want to reach the remote areas people, and those who can develop new innovation, new solution, new startups, and they will solve the local ecosystem. So your contributions as a speaker, those who support World Talent Economy Forums, I'm sure in your life, in between this year, you will see many successful youth community. And hopefully, this is the objective of our life. That's why we are contributing in World Talent Economy Forum. I want to give a special thanks to Mr. Rob, Mr. Alex for your amazing job, Professor Donald, Dr. Williams, Mr. James, and all of the 300 speakers from 100 different countries. Thank you everyone for your support. And audience, I want to give you special thanks. Thank you everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Sharif.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.